Hey, welcome back to the online training shop. In the last video, we talked about why buying a house feels so difficult right now. And today, we're going to answer one of the most important questions. How much house can you actually afford? And more importantly, how much should you afford? If you've been enjoying this series, feel free to like the video and subscribe if you want to keep building on this. So here's where a lot of people get tripped up. They go to a lender and they get approved for a number, and that number feels like their budget. But just because you're approved for something doesn't mean it's comfortable. Lenders are looking at things a little differently. They're focused on risk, not your lifestyle. They want to know if they will get paid back, not if you'll be able to afford a vacation next summer. To understand how banks think, we need to talk about the 28-36 rule. This is a classic benchmark in the mortgage industry. The first number, 28, refers to your front-end ratio. This means your total monthly housing payment, that's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, shouldn't exceed 28% of your gross monthly income. Gross income is what you make before taxes are taken out. This is the starting point for almost every lender out there. This is where the first major disconnect happens. The bank looks at your gross income, but you live on your net income, your take-home pay. If you have high state taxes, health insurance premiums, or 401k contributions, that 28% of gross can easily feel like 40% or even 50% of what's actually hitting your bank account every month. This is why a safe bank number can feel so incredibly tight in real life. The second number, 36, is your back-end ratio. This is your total debt-to-income ratio, or DTI. This includes your housing payment plus all other monthly debt obligations, car loans, student loans, credit card minimums. Banks generally don't want this total to exceed 36% of your gross income. If you have a lot of other debt, the amount they'll give you for a house drops significantly, but they will still let you push to that 36% limit. Think about that. If you have a $500 car payment and $300 in student loans, that's $800 of your allowable debt already spoken for. The bank will still let you go up to that 36% limit, but they aren't asking if you'd like to travel or eat out or save for a wedding. They are just asking, will this person likely default on this loan? Those are two very different standards. Your allowable debt is just a ceiling, not a target. Keep that in mind as you plan. Now let's talk about the down payment. This is one of the biggest levers you have. A 3% down payment means a much higher monthly mortgage and usually an extra fee called PMI. A 20% down payment removes that fee and significantly lowers your principal balance. But here's the kicker. Don't exhaust all your cash on the down payment just to hit a percentage. Having cash on hand for the unexpected is often more important for your long-term stability than a slightly lower monthly payment. PMI, or private mortgage insurance, is an extra fee you pay if your down payment is less than 20%. It protects the lender, not you. It can add anywhere from $50 to $200 or more to your monthly bill. Over 5 or 10 years, that's thousands of dollars that doesn't go towards your equity. Understanding how and when PMI drops off is a crucial part of your 12-month and 5-year affordability plan. Don't ignore it in your calculations. It matters more than you think. Beyond the principal and interest, remember PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. In some states, property taxes can add hundreds, even $1,000 to your monthly bill. And don't forget HOA fees. If you're looking at a condo or a planned community, that $400 monthly fee is the equivalent of about $60,000 in additional mortgage debt. When people say, I can afford the mortgage, they often forget the T and the I and the HOA. Then there's the 1% rule of maintenance. Financial experts suggest setting aside 1% of your home's value every year for repairs. On a $500,000 home, that's $5,000 a year or over $400 a month. The bank doesn't include this in your DTI, but your bank account certainly feels it when the AC goes out in July or the roof starts leaking. When you own, you are the landlord. There's no one else to call and no one else to pay the bill. That responsibility is yours alone. Be prepared for it from day one. Before you even look at a house, you need a post-closing emergency fund. This isn't your down payment. This is 3 to 6 months of your total new expenses. Mortgage, utilities, food, sitting in a high-yield savings account. This should be there after you've handed over the keys. Don't touch it for the house purchase. If you buy a house and have $0 in the bank the next day, you aren't a homeowner, you're a tenant of the bank. One broken water heater away from a financial crisis. Stability comes from that cash buffer. Affordability also depends on where you live. A $500,000 home in Texas might have property taxes of $10,000 a year, while in another state it might be $2,000. That's an $800 difference in your monthly payment for the exact same loan. You have to research your specific county and tax district. Don't use generic national averages. Your local reality is the only thing that matters for your monthly cash flow. Get the real numbers. This leads us back to being house poor. This is when most of your income goes toward your home, and there's not much left for anything else. You might have a beautiful 5-bedroom house, but if you can't afford to furnish it, or you're stressed every time you go to the grocery store, is it worth it? A house should be a sanctuary, not a source of constant low-level panic. I've seen so many people sacrifice their 20s and 30s to a mortgage that was just too big. We also have to consider the opportunity cost. Every dollar that goes into an oversized mortgage is a dollar that isn't going into your 401k or a brokerage account or a business venture. Real estate can be a great investment, but it's also a forced savings plan with very high carrying costs. If you buy a smaller house and invest the difference, you might actually end up with a higher net worth in the long run. There's also the psychological buffer. Just because the math works doesn't mean your stress levels will. Some people are comfortable with a high DTI, while others feel anxious if housing costs exceed 20% of take-home pay. You have to know your own sleep-at-night number. Aim lower than the bank allows if you value security. There is a massive psychological benefit to knowing that you could survive a job loss or a pay cut. Because your fixed costs are low, that peace of mind is worth more than square footage. Think about the lifestyle trade-offs. A larger mortgage might mean fewer dinners out, fewer trips, or delaying a new car. Are those trade-offs worth the extra square footage? For some, yes. For others, the house becomes a gilded cage. Before you sign that 30-year commitment, spend a few months living that mortgage payment. Save the difference between your current rent and your projected mortgage into a separate account. See how it feels. It's the best reality check you can do for your future self. Take your time with this. So what's the better approach? It's working backward. Instead of asking, how much will they give me? Ask, what monthly payment would let me sleep soundly at night? Start with your actual take-home pay. Subtract your current savings goals, your lifestyle expenses, and your other debts. What's left? That's your budget. Use a mortgage calculator to see what home price that translates to. Your comfort number may surprise you. It might be $100,000 less than the bank's approval number, and that's okay. In fact, it's great. When you do this, you stay in control. You aren't at the mercy of interest rate hikes or unexpected layoffs. Because you have a buffer, you have breathing room. Buying a house is a big emotional decision, but it needs to be grounded in cold, hard, personal numbers. Don't let a lender's spreadsheet define your life. You are the only one who knows what your life actually costs to live. You are in charge of your quality of life. Take ownership of that number before the bank does. It's your most important financial move. In the next video, we're going to take this even further and look at real-world examples. We'll break down exactly what a $500,000 home costs per month in different scenarios, interest rates, and tax regions. If this helped you think about your budget differently, feel free to like the video and subscribe. I'm Maya, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and stay in control of your financial future.